Our culture has left Christianity behind. It seeks to form us in its own image. Just like Daniel and his friends, young followers of Jesus must find a new way to embody their faith, one that's faithful to Jesus' teachings and one that is creatively missional towards culture. This is our calling. This is our battle. This is the Daniel Generation. Hey guys, welcome to the Daniel Generation. Today we have a bit of a special episode for you. We have Caleb Henry on the show, and he's a film major, and he also really loves Jesus, so it's a perfect fit. We're going to be giving you guys a bit of a paradigm for how to engage with film specifically and kind of art in general as a Christian. Because on one hand, some Christians tend to, want to put a cross on everything, and if it doesn't have a cross on it, we don't even want to watch it. And that can be really unhelpful and, exclusive. And then you only have bad movies to watch, like things that, like God's Not Dead too.
Mm-hmm. When that's your best quality that you can produce, there's a problem with your art form.
Exactly. But then on the other hand, some of us don't have a paradigm as, at all for how to engage with any sort of art, especially film, as Christians. So we'll just watch anything blindly, and that can't be helpful either. So today we're going to kind of carve out a middle way for you guys. So first we'll introduce Caleb, if you want to just give us a little bit of a backstory, who you are.
Yeah. So like you said, I'm a film major. I live here in Colorado, and I do movie reviews on YouTube, and then I also own a video production company. So video and movies is kind of my life, and that's what I want to do with my life, is make movies. And I want to elevate movies from being a Christian movie that is garbage to a quality movie that has Christian values. And I think that's where we need to be going as Christians in the industry, is we need to get stuff elevated to a quality and not just be exclusively Christian this or Christian that, because that doesn't mean it's the best art. And in order to create the best content, that you just got to get the best people around you to work on it. And so that's kind of what I want to do, is try and get involved in elevating the quality of Christian content.
Absolutely. And I think we need it. All through Christian history, we were some of the best artists, some of the most iconic pieces of art, whether it be paintings or literature, were explicitly Christian, but not in the same way that a lot of today's stuff is. Mm-hmm. But then on the other hand, today's world, art is almost entirely secular. So a lot of Christians don't want to engage with that. As someone who loves film like you do and has done movie reviews and watched movies that some Christians are probably a little shy to watch, what's the method you're using? How do you kind of reconcile your faith with maybe some of those films, or maybe just any film that's not, something that's explicitly like for a Christian market? Yeah.
So the way I kind of think of it is Hollywood in general is a very bad place in terms of morals and things like that. Mm-hmm. But we are called as Christians to go into those places. Yeah. He says, be in the world, but not of the world. And so I take that as, okay, I want to make movies. That's something that God has given me, a desire. And the only way to do that and impact non-Christians is to be in that industry. Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, that's not saying I'm going to go and be like, I'm just going to make whatever. I'm still going to be very cautious about what I work on and everything, but I need to know what makes these movies good. So when it got to the point where I wasn't sure if I should be watching, like The Godfather and Goodfellas and things like this, if you don't watch those movies, you will never be a great filmmaker. Yeah. Period.
They're like the greats.
There is a reason those movies are that good. And I need to know why. Now, it took me a while I wrestled with this because, those movies have a lot of content in them. They have a lot of language, especially. Violence, we tend to, as Christians, just kind of brush away, but yeah, it's all still kind of the same pot. So if you're going to allow violence, you just got to decide for you what affects you, right? Language does not affect me. I could be around somebody that is just cursing up a storm for days on end, and I'm not going to change how I talk. I realized that, and once I got to that point and realized, okay, watching Goodfellas doesn't affect my life, then I'm okay watching it because it doesn't bother me. I don't sit here and think those thoughts the whole day. It isn't a thing. Now, I do still avoid a lot of movies with sexual content. I still avoid those or watch them differently. Lots of times I'll watch them with a remote in hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's an area that I do struggle. So I've gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, I know I don't struggle in this area, but I do struggle in this one, so I'm going to avoid those if I can. at all costs. That doesn't mean that I haven't seen most of those movies. I still have, because we all struggle and we all have stumbling places. I'm not going to say that every movie I've watched, I was like, yep, I should have watched that movie. It happens. But
Absolutely.
Kind of getting back to the original question, the way you as a Christian need to know what your struggles are and what is going to affect you. If it's going to affect your life personally, if it's going to affect your walk with God, don't watch that stuff. There's a lot of Christians that should never watch Goodfellas. It would shake them in a bad way, and they wouldn't like it. They would start acting differently. Don't watch those. That's not for everyone. Not every movie is for everyone. But me and people in the industry got to a point where it's like, if we don't watch these and don't understand why they're good and what stories they're telling, we're never going to be able to create content that lasts like those do, because they've been around a long time.
Absolutely. I really like that. I mean, it kind of reminds me, Paul even talks about that. There's things that for you would be, a stumbling block to sin. For me, in my freedom, they're not really a problem, and vice versa. So maybe for some people, there are movies that would almost be not to use the word necessarily, but almost like a trigger for things that you would struggle with. And then for others, they'd have almost more license in that sense. So it would definitely take some discernment.
For sure.
I think that kind of reminds me, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about this. I think the problem that most of us probably have is not knowing what sort of things are going to affect us negatively and not being cautious enough. A lot of us, I shouldn't say everybody, I can't speak for all of you guys, but I know for me the main problem, and I know I'm not alone in this, is just blindly turning on Netflix and watching something without any sort of intentionality behind it. But the more that I've thought about it and the more we've talked, I think that's really the factor that makes the difference, because, one of the big things we talk about here is that the things you do most often form you in any capacity, whether it's spiritual or not. It kind of is the liturgy of your life, the patterns and habits that you develop. So if we're just mindlessly, binge watching all of Ozark, that could be forming us in a way that would be different if we were, a little more intentional with how we approach it.
This brings up a good point. There's a reason I don't watch TV shows like Friends and Seinfeld and The Office. I'll watch them with other people, like if we're just there hanging out, because that's just a good time. If I sit down and watch those on my own, it's just garbage going in and out. Yeah. I don't learn anything from those shows. I don't gain anything from them. It's just wasted time. And you get in that mode where you just sit there and just watching the same thing over and over and over and over. And every episode is virtually the same thing. Like, it's all the same. It's repetitive.
Yeah, same tropes, same characters.
I've talked with my wife about this when we go and we're trying to find a TV show or movie to watch. And I'll just be scrolling along going, no. They could be good shows, but I know that if I start watching them, I'm just going to check out. And I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
So I only select shows and movies that when I'm watching, I'm going to stay engaged and focused the whole time.
Yeah. I'm kind of going through the same thing. I've, binge watched all of Friends in The Office, and it's really interesting.
Most people have.
Oh, yeah. On repeat, Parks and Rec, same way. Yep. Recently, I started Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Same sort of thing. And what I realized, especially with those more lighthearted comedies, they're almost designed to be a replacement for like human relationships, which is terrifying to me. And, the more I realize that, the less I actually want to engage with that type of content at all. Because like you said, it's not like it's the best art out there. They're winning awards for being groundbreaking.
But it can and I'm not saying you shouldn't go watch an episode or two. Like, that's a good way to relax, good way to end your day. But it's when people sit there and watch it 10 episodes in a row that you have a problem, because virtually you're watching one episode and you have 6 episodes of nothing, and then one episode at the end that you remember. And you don't remember any of the things. It's all just a blur at that point. And that's that binge generation that we have going on.
Yeah.
And they're creating shows specifically for that reason.
Yeah. Oh, there was a show. Oh, man, bringing this up on this podcast is kind of funny. But there's a show, Big Mouth. It's an animated show. And in terms of content, you probably shouldn't watch it. It's like South Park bad. It's just completely crass and crude, and it's an animated show, but they actually make a reference to that. There's a joke at one of the end of the episodes where there's a cliffhanger, and it says, "You're not worried about the cliffhanger. You're just going to binge the next 3 episodes anyways." And then you laugh, and then you totally do. You click next, and you watch the next 3 episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that goes back to, I think it's a lot harder to be intentional and engaged with the content when you're just kind of mindlessly taking it in. And they're actually proving with other studies that it's not even restful. It's not a restful activity to just binge watch 7 episodes of Friends.
It's not.
It's mentally stimulating in a way that's not relaxation. It's not recuperation. So there's not really anything to gain from it. But we kind of want to move more to a discussion on how do we positively engage with content then. So obviously maybe binge watching shows like that, we should be a little more intentional about how we're approaching those. But what about a movie that might be on some people's radar as something that's off limits? I know a lot of people for Harry Potter, that might be something, or like the Goodfellas or, Quentin Tarantino film. How would a Christian faithfully engage with something like that without, sort of compromising themselves or being formed by it unintentionally?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, let's start with Harry Potter because that's a big one in the Christian world, right? When I was growing up, we weren't allowed to watch it.
Oh, really?
Yep, because there was something that came out, I believe it was in Focus on the Family, that came out that said Christians shouldn't be watching this, and my parents jumped right on. They've since apologized, but they jumped right on and said, okay, you shouldn't be watching it. But yet we were able to watch Lord of the Rings. Okay. Now there's a big difference in those two. I'm not really going to get into that right now, but there is differences. And I can see why my parents were okay with one and not the other. But they had not watched Harry Potter.
Totally.
They had no idea what it was. And none of our friends that said shouldn't watch it had ever seen it either. Not one person that I personally knew had seen it and said, yeah, you shouldn't watch that. It was all based on what somebody 3 states away said you should or shouldn't watch. And that, now that I've seen Harry Potter, that bothers me because I've seen it. I'm like, that movie's not at all what everybody said it was. And the biggest problem is that, man, if we had watched those movies with our parents, they could have discussed with us the problems they had with the movie.
Oh, yeah.
And then we still would have been able to enjoy this awesome fantasy world while still getting taught why Christians would have had problems with it, right? With the magic, or why they used magic in this way and not that way. Because there's magic in Lord of the Rings too.
Yeah, that's what cracks me up about the whole Harry Potter thing.
And I think
Narnia.
I realized the Harry Potter thing, I guess I won't go into it. It's not black and white about who's good and bad in that movie.
Yeah.
People using magic, good and bad, doing bad things with magic and all that. Lord of the Rings, there's not one time in that whole movie where you don't know if a person's good or bad.
And if they switch, you know immediately.
Exactly. There's
Like
no gray
sides,
area.
yeah.
Same with Narnia. It's like, Tumnus, or not Tumnus. It's been so long since I've seen those movies. When the witch lady does her thing, it's obvious when he switches over to be bad and help her. Harry Potter's just a big mess, right? Now, you could argue that or whatever.
It's kind of realistic in that way,
Yes. Well, it is, though. And that's where I think if our parents had watched it with us and just discussed with us, okay, this shouldn't have happened or this should have happened, man, we wouldn't have had that discussion of, ban Harry Potter. But that's just because they didn't, and I don't want to just like blame my parents here, but parents in general and people in general just need to watch these movies knowing things. If I had gone into Harry Potter when I was 13 or 14, knowing there's problems with this movie, be careful, they wouldn't have affected me. I would have been there watching it and going, oh, okay, so I see he's using his magic in a bad way here. He shouldn't be doing that. Like, I'm thinking through the movies I'm watching it, not just thinking, he's Harry, he's the good guy. Like, you got to go in with the right
you're
mindset.
mentally engaged.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the biggest thing I've thought about. And Harry Potter's been a big one. So I studied theology, but my other major was English. And so this was a constant debate that I was in the middle of in both, degrees was on one hand, the Christian studies majors would be coming at it from a theological side and the literature majors from another side. And when you actually are engaged with the narrative and reading it for what it's presenting itself as, unpopular opinion that's just basically true, it's actually a Christian narrative. She consulted her Anglican priest, in writing it to have the whole arc of all 7 books be about redemption and resurrection and sacrifice. I mean, you see that with the resurrection stone at the end. So that's what's interesting is if you are engaged and you're actually in the case of the books reading or in the case of the movies watching with intensity and interpreting it as it sends itself to you, then you get a whole different picture. I mean, it can almost be helpful for Christian formation in some ways.
Definitely.
Which, bringing that up, people are like, ooh.
Harry Potter.
But you're right. We look at the surface and we look at the black and white of things, I think, a little bit too much. And even outside of things like Harry Potter, which, if she explicitly consulted a priest in writing it, that's a little different than something like Breaking Bad. But in the same way, even with a show like that or a movie like Pulp Fiction or something, there's a way that we could probably engage with it along the same lines.
Yeah. Now, we do need to be careful, and I was thinking about this earlier. Too often critics, and especially like people that are trying to dig deep into what it was meaning are putting words in the director's mouth, right? Or the writer's mouth. Lots of times they don't have a more to it than what they're just writing on the paper. And we just think, oh, okay, so they meant this by this and that. And sometimes no. Sometimes they just wanted it because it's cool. And yet we dig so much into it. But that's also literature in general, is that you get more out of it than probably what they originally intended. So we got to make sure that when we watch movies or read books, that one, we don't think that they are, everything we're getting from it is something they intended us to get out of it. And two, that we would just identify those things. Because if you're not identifying what you're getting out of a book or a movie, that's dangerous. It's like, what's the point?
It's kind of like binge watching Friends. Like
it is. It is, yeah. And so let's talk about Pulp Fiction here. So Pulp Fiction's another one of those that
great movie,
most Christians would never say you should watch, right? I don't watch that movie for the good values I'm going to learn.
Absolutely.
I watch that movie for the technical greatness of it. And that's how I separate the movies. There's some movies, The Godfather, man, you can dig deep into the backstory of that, and you can get a lot out of how that story unfolds and everything. Pulp Fiction, man, that's just a movie of showing you how to edit right, how to shoot stuff right, how to act right, how to write dialogue. Like, that is a technically perfect movie.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And that's why I watch that movie. I don't sit there and watch it and go, I'm going to be fed today in my spiritual walk, right?
Yeah.
Or in my life. I'm going to feel better about it and watch
sermon
Pulp
of Pulp
Fiction.
Fiction,
Yeah,
yeah.
right? Now, people could pull stuff out of that, sure.
Oh, I will in a second.
And you will. But I don't, because I don't think of things that way. Now, there's other movies that I do that with, but you do your Pulp Fiction thing and we'll jump to another movie in a minute.
So this is where the literature major comes in, right? In one sense, you're right in saying not every motif is this blatantly huge thing that the author's like, aha, someone finally got it.
Right.
But everything is also important too. And if it isn't, you should cut it out. That's like script writing 101. In Pulp Fiction, if we put on, like interpretive lenses and we're reading the narrative that's put forth to us, you're seeing chaos and death and murder and addiction all swirling around the briefcase that they're carrying and trying to deliver in the movie. And you never see what's in it, right? It's always just this shining golden aura coming out of, but everyone is just up in arms over it. And there's all sorts of calamity over this. And there's even, Samuel L. Jackson's awesome Bible misquote.
Yes.
And all of it is centering around this briefcase, and it has this big theme of greed. And I think that's really what the movie, the narrative at least, is talking about, is what happens when we're so consumed with the greed of more that we're willing to do just horrendous things to do it and gain power by it. And so, they get wrapped up in all this stuff, and then, there's a lot of just calamity that surrounds it.
Yeah, and that's a good example right there, what you just said, of why we rewatch movies, okay? I've never watched Pulp Fiction with that lens on.
Yeah.
So now next time I watch it, I might get more out of it than I ever did from the non-technical side of things. So now, just because we've had this discussion, I'm now going to approach that movie differently. And that's kind of how all movies are. That's why you rewatch them over and over and over, is you learn more in life, and therefore that movie means different things to you. Yeah. And so that's why these discussions need to happen. You shouldn't just go to a movie theater, watch a great movie, or any movie, and just leave and never discuss it with anybody. You should always have a discussion with somebody. Why was it good? Why was it bad? What did it make you feel? How come they did this in it? Or all the things you need to have in those discussions so we can all get more out of movies and film and books and all that stuff, and not just, oh, the action was good. Like, who cares about that? No, like, what are you getting out of it inside you? How is this movie feeding you? And some movies don't feed you.
Yeah, some of them are just blatantly wrong, and
yeah,
we should know that and identify it.
Some movies are straight up just action. That's the whole point of the movie. It's like, okay, well, that's just entertainment at that point, right?
Yeah.
And I would like to say that some of the Fast and Furious movies are that way. Like, they're
some of them?
Yeah, probably all but maybe one. Yeah, all of them.
Yeah, all of them. They're just guilty pleasures.
Action.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of the movie, and people enjoy that. And I'm not going to say you shouldn't go enjoy that, because that's entertainment.
But know what it is and know its place. Yeah.
Yes.
Whereas something like Pulp Fiction might have a deeper.
Yeah, I'm not watching that for entertainment only.
Yeah.
I'm getting entertainment out of it, but I'm getting gaining knowledge by watching this movie. I feel like, at least.
Gotcha.
That's how I approach it.
Yeah, and I think I think it all goes back to just like anything in your life as a Christian, intentionality is kind of the key, right? So if you're going into a Fast and Furious movie knowing it's kind of just a veg out, chill entertainment movie, that's fine. You can maybe turn off a little bit. Just like if you're with a friend watching an episode of The Office and maybe not binging a whole season, you know? But if you're going into something, I don't know, like Breaking Bad. I keep bringing that one up because it's just a great example. The narrative of Breaking Bad, by the way, is just telling you how horrendously evil Walt's character is. That's the whole. If you missed that, then you didn't watch it correctly because you're supposed to hate him by the end of it, and that's the whole point. But if you're intentionally engaging with something like that, then you're actually getting a message that as Christians we can agree with. Like, oh yeah, someone giving up their wonderful family life to become a meth lord, basically. Yeah, that's terrible. Kingpin. Yeah, that's absolutely Breaking Bad, you know? But then there's also movies where it could totally be sending a message that we absolutely shouldn't agree with. And you were talking about this earlier, if you want to kind of expound on that.
Yeah. Well, what was the example I gave you?
Oh, it was perfect, and I don't remember what it was.
Oh, no. Well, let's just go back to, like, I'm kind of drawing a blank because I tend to get most things out of a movie. Like, it's hard for me to watch a movie and not pull positives out of it.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of one that has like a moral message or something that we just blatantly as Christians would be like, nope, full stop.
Right.
I know they're out there, but now that we've talked about
of course. Now that you mention it, it's like hard to think of. But those would probably also be a lot of the movies that I avoid. Now, there are movies that I watch, I see review for, they say what the movie's about, and I'm like, I don't ever want to watch that.
Gotcha.
I don't need to. Usually they're in the horror genre.
Whereas I love horror movies, yeah.
It doesn't do anything for me positive. Yeah. It's only negative in my life. Other than a very few cases, I don't like it. And so those movies, it's hard for me to pull anything positive out of them, so I just avoid them completely.
Yeah.
I don't like being scared. I don't like the message that a lot of them are saying. Those kind of things. Whereas like a good thriller would be different. Because those can have such powerful stories. We'll say like the movie Seven. Okay. Have you seen Seven?
I have not.
Well, I'm not going to spoil it, so I'm going to skip to a different movie. Have you seen Silence of the Lambs?
Not in a long time.
Oh my goodness.
No, I've seen it, but like I was a lot younger.
Silence of the Lambs is a great example of if you just went and watched that movie without knowing what you're getting into, you'd be flooded with a lot of evil after that movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
The movie is about catching a guy who does horrible things to girls, right? And if you're watching it through the eyes of, okay, this guy's an evil guy, these people are good, and let's see how this plays out, it ends and it's kind of a happy ending. Yeah. Right? I'm not going to say Silence of the Lambs is a happy ending. It's very brutal, and Hannibal Lecter is just insane. But the relationship between her and the evil people and how much she hates the evil is powerful. And we can get behind that.
Yeah, totally.
And this is also realistic.
Yeah.
People in real life do this kind of stuff. So it's not just a made up thing. It's a real life scenario that we can see and go, wow, I remember hearing about something like that. 20 years ago. So it's not like we're just watching this and it's ridiculous and never going to happen and yada, yada. This stuff does happen. And so learning about how to handle that kind of situation, man, I learned a lot from Jodie Foster's character in that movie. How much she grew and how much, like, how evil Hannibal Lecter is in such a smart way. And like going, okay, like how am I being influenced by smarter people than me? Things like that. Like I'm always constantly thinking that.
Absolutely. And kind of going off that, one thing we had talked about before we hit record, which I now regret, is that if there is something that you're, in a movie, you're watching it and it's not like that where you can be like, oh, I get behind that, evil is bad and she's condemning it there, or like Breaking Bad same way, or maybe it's a positive message. If all of that is gone and there's a movie that's sending just like a blatantly bad message and it's like supporting it, you can call that out. If you're engaged, like we're talking about, and we're, responsibly watching whatever film we're watching, and there's something that it's, in full support of that as a Christian, we probably shouldn't be. If you're engaged, you're less likely to be influenced by it because you can go, that's wrong. I don't really agree with that. But that's part of the conversation. I think that's the second component to this, right? Is you're intentionally watching it. You're really interpreting what's happening. You know why you're watching it and you know what it's saying. But more than that, you're sort of having this conversation with the film. And that's really universal to any type of art, like whether it's a painting or even music, you're in this sort of conversation with it.
Yeah. And there's actually a really good example of this happening. So the movie Bully came out 2009, 2010, maybe somewhere in there. And it was it was a movie about bullying in high school, middle school area.
Gotcha.
It had like 13 F words in it. Okay. So it got an R rating. Well, the people that made it were like, we need to get this movie shown to kids, teenagers,
gotcha.
so we should not get an R rating. So they begged the MPAA to drop the rating, and they wouldn't do it. They said, this is the way it is, period. So they gave it a no rating. And I was thinking in my head, that movie should never be watched by a high schooler without having an adult there to discuss what the issues were in the movie afterward. And it's just like shocking that people were like, oh, our kid needs to be able to go see that movie. It's like, man, if you just send him to see that movie and they don't talk with him about it, what's the point?
Yeah.
So therefore, it should have gotten an R rating, and you should have taken your kid to go see it. Right? And so that really bothered me, that so many people were like, yeah, you need to be seeing this movie. But yet parents weren't the ones in like helping their children through these scenarios. Because kids aren't going to learn from a movie at 13 and be able to decipher what it means. They're just going to see it and go, oh, that kid got bullied, it's bad, and move on. But it's like, no, why is it bad? And how are they bullying? And how are you bullying? You know, all these things, they weren't discussed. And that really made me mad, actually, when that came out. And that it was like, there's a simple solution to this. Just discuss movies with your children or with peers and learn from them. And without that, you don't really have a good movie.
Yeah.
Or you have a pointless movie, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I mean, that's really the whole thing we're talking about, right? Is that we should be discussing it. And so these are all good ideas. Really what we wanted to do this episode is just introduce the paradigm with which we can watch movies, you know, so we want to be engaged, intentionally watching them, and, you know, engage in the discussion, and then calling out the things that are good and bad, in a way that we're not just, you know, shoving them all into the corner and not engaging at all with this part of culture, but also not just letting ourselves be completely formed by it. Next time we have Caleb on for this particular segment, we're actually going to do an example. So join us for that. In the meantime, my camera's running out of room, so we're going to go ahead and stop this episode. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like this episode and you could benefit from it, please go ahead, leave a good review on iTunes or YouTube, wherever you're watching or listening from. It really helps us out. And if you know someone else who'd be interested, go ahead and give it a share to them. It really helps get the word out. But that's all we have.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, and I look forward to our next discussions.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming on, and we'll see you guys later.